Thank you for joining the Once Changing the World, India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Abbey, and today we have with us Mr. Trent McConaghy, a computer scientist, entrepreneur, author, and a public speaker, recognized for his contributions to artificial intelligence and blockchain technology. Trent's career began in the late 1990s conducting AI research for the Canadian Department of National Defense, and he has founded ADA, BigchainDB, Solido, and is currently the founder of Ocean Protocol, a decentralized platform with a vision to create a global infrastructure that supports sustainable data sharing. Topic of discussion today is going to be blockchain, decentralized AI, and BCI for humans to stay relevant in a world of AI. So, Trent, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. It would be great if you could start with a brief background and introduction.
Sure. So thanks very much for having me. And I'm a fan of your show. You have a lot of amazing guests on your podcast. So it's really an honor to be on this. The two-line intro is I was raised on a pig farm in rural Canada and then became an AI researcher. That's a very quick summary. A bit more detailed. I grew up, shoveling pig manure and driving grain trucks, playing hockey like any good Canadian, and actually hacking on computers. My father and mother, the farmers, they got me a computer when I was quite young. And my brother and I learned how to code on our own from the reference manual and just started coding and never looked back. Along the way, I got very excited about AI and I was hacking on it on my own, as well as brain computer interfaces too. And more, I'm a big nerd, whether it's for AI or VR or blockchain or any of that. All of it is very exciting to me. And AI was really the first thing I was super passionate about as sort of a deep tech. And, software was always the unlock to do these things. So I had worked for National Defence Canada as a summer student for a couple summers, working 100 hours a week because I just couldn't believe that someone would pay me to work on AI. This is the late 90s, and I was doing time series analysis of radar data. So if you are a person driving around in a tank, there's two of you in the tank. One of the 5 tanks that Canada has, it's very small military. I don't know if it's 5, but it's small. And anyway, so there's one driver, and then there's also a person sitting there with headphones listening to the radar as audio radar, and then trying to identify, okay, what's out there? Is it birds flying by? Is it soldiers walking by? Is it trucks driving what? And then we asked the question, could we automate this with AI listening to this radar, the computer listening to the radar and then classifying, yes, it's birds flying, yes, it's people walking by, etc. So I did that for a couple summer jobs and got to explore a lot of different emerging technologies, neural networks, genetic programming, fuzzy logic, as well as, the classical statistical stuff, things like autoregressive formulations, all the fancier stuff, crazy stats. And really, there's a lot of power in using good old statistics within AI. These days, a lot of what's called data science is really simply statistics, but it's a much better label and much less scary. So I did that. And I'm pretty happy with the results of that. Published my first paper, all that, and used that expertise in my final year of undergraduate as a student. Me and 4 friends basically spent all of our time working on the project to basically try to automatically design analog circuits. But as of the late 90s, it was really hard to design analog circuits. So we saw some research that had been done at Stanford and elsewhere. Saw that it was taking like a month on a cluster to run, and we said, can we make it run faster? And so we basically went for it and pulled a bunch of tricks with optimization and coding and parallel processing and more, and got it down to our first prototype, getting pretty cool results in 10 minutes on 5 Sun workstations, 5 Linux boxes at the time. And that was the outcome of our design project for undergraduate. School had kind of become a hobby. We still did well with marks-wise and stuff. But we did this, and then immediately after we did this, we launched the company. As soon as we graduated, we did the company. Within about a year and a half, we had raised $10 million from larger investors, including Intel and Synopsys, the largest company in the space. And it was, the height of the dot-com bubble. And nonetheless, we were just, 6 kids out of rural Saskatchewan, Canada. There was no deep tech stuff there at all, but we decided to just do it anyway. And it worked, right? And then we grew the company. We had our ups and downs. And 5 years later, the company was acquired by Synopsys, which was one of our investors and also one of the 2 largest companies in the space. And all in all, very happy with that experience. We had, went from beginning to end in a startup. and felt a lot of pain, but also learned about what it means to chase customers, what it means about to build and ship a product, all of this. And yeah, that was my first company. So that sort of overall, that chapter ended in early 2004 for me. Maybe I'll stop there and see if there's questions before I go on to the next part.
Yeah, how awesome is that? I mean, from farm to being able to create these global impact. Right from you mentioned the national defense. By automating audio data for tanks to creating these circuits and then being acquired by Synopsys. That's such an awesome journey, and it's not just that. That's just halfway through. Now your journey onwards is getting more and more awesome. You mentioned about the Canadian defense. And defense seems to be at this point in time. There are two wars going on. There's many more, but there's two which is pretty much prominent, and everybody knows about the Russian-Ukraine war and the Israel-Gaza war. And what I've been hearing at least is that there is more and more militarization of AI. Though, I mean, Ukraine, there is still these first-person perspective view drones. It's not truly automated. But then I hear is that these small cheap drones are destroying these like multi-million tanks, and that's how Ukraine is defending its area. And that's happening. It's not just with Ukraine, Russia, but also in Israel. Israel's got its Iron Dome and using AI in defense technology. Since you've invested in AI, paint a picture of what the world is going to look like. With this war being automated and having this layer of AI where we are giving or allowing these machines to create or make decisions in the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, overall, to be honest, I don't think that much about war. Obviously, I don't like it. I see that it's a tool that nation states employ for better and for worse, and mostly for worse. And I really prefer, honestly, to just be thinking about tech. Back when I, got my start, there weren't many options at all of where to work and stuff. I would have personally, I wouldn't have said yes unless it was a very a defensive thing as opposed to an offensive thing. I see in general, anytime you have a general purpose technology, it's a double-edged sword, right? It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. Some things are asymmetric. For example, in cryptography, it's really asymmetric on the side of the defender, right? Because you can encrypt things, and it's much harder for someone trying to decrypt that on the other side, right? So it has a leaning towards personal sovereignty. In the case of AI, we don't know right now whether it's going to be, leaning towards good or bad, leaning towards individuals or nations. It seems that it's very, very powerful in all directions, right? We'll get into it, but I have worries that AIs will get a lot, not only get par to humans, but get a lot smarter. And I have thoughts on that too. But yeah, that's the macro level of view about it. And even though like war is terrible and all this, I see that if we think about what has driven history in the past, wars are kind of things that happen there, but it's really the technology that makes the difference that sort of helps civilization to level up. And we have to keep asking that question. What are the things that we can do to make a difference to help civilization level up, despite the fact that there are wars, despite the fact that there are nations that are basically causing destruction, hurting value, killing humans, all this, right? So if you want, I'd love to just wrap up my sort of the rest of my career, but I can do it more quickly if that's okay.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Great. Yeah, sure. So I've been following Bitcoin for years, and my friends and I would hang about it and talk about it all the time. Very exciting stuff. And we were only really focusing on, the financial implications. And we didn't really get the idea of blockchain and how it could affect all these other applications. But I moved to Berlin and started hanging out with the community there that was not only talking about Bitcoin, but also about blockchain and how it could really be this sort of like database for civilization, this data layer that anyone could use to store any data they wanted and to do transactions for whatever they wanted and run software on top, where you don't even have to think about where the server is. It's just software that's running. And, people call that smart contracts, things like Ethereum. And so, but this was 2013, there was Bitcoin, but there really wasn't much else. There was no Ethereum. There was no anything else like that at all. So we started building what these days is known as NFTs. My wife is a professional curator. She had worked at the Louvre and all this. And we saw this problem. She had identified this problem herself of how do you collect digital art? She is working with digital artists who would sell a CD to a collector the collector would come back, a year later. They say, my CD is scratched. Could I get a new CD, please? And the artist would say, well, no, I sold you the artifact. So then what, right? So there was sort of confusion around this, and what it meant was anyone creating digital art, GIFs or videos or just images in general, it was really hard to sell them for any value at all because the digital media problem, who has copyright, who has rights, but then also it wasn't really treated as something of value, and how do you know if someone isn't faking it, right? It's much easier to copy the digital, a perfect copy, all that, compared to, say, copying the Mona Lisa physically, right? So these are all problems, and we asked the question, what if you could own digital art the way that you own Bitcoin? And at the heart of it, it's holding a private key. I own, one Bitcoin if I have the private key to a Bitcoin address that has that one Bitcoin. And a private key is sort of like a password, basically. Think of it like that. That points to a very specific Bitcoin address. And so we asked that question, what if we could own digital art the way that we own Bitcoin? Turned out to be a great question to ask. We pulled in that thread, and we ended up building a platform for digital art built on top of Bitcoin itself. And this was 2013, 2014. We called it a scribe. We got about 10,000 artists using it. We went to, and a seed round. We went to raise a Series A, and it was really hard raising money because, Web3 and the broader blockchain stuff wasn't a thing yet. So 10,000 users wasn't a great number from traditional web standards. So we had to pivot. We pivoted into doing database stuff for a while. That didn't quite work. So we pivoted. It worked okay tech-wise, but our target customers were enterprises, and they really weren't ready for blockchain yet. So we pivoted again, going back to my roots of AI. And we saw that blockchain could really help problems in AI, especially helping AI researchers get their hands on data. And so we, in 2017, we focused on that, and that's Ocean Protocol. So really this sort of, think of it like an exchange, just like you might have an exchange to buy Bitcoin. But in this case, instead of buying Bitcoin with, say, US dollars or rupees or otherwise, you're exchanging US dollars for data sets, for training AI models, for AI models themselves, et cetera. And so we built that. We've shipped that with Ocean for years now. And then we've been doing things on top, things like time series prediction. Once again, going back to my roots at National Defense in the 90s. And we're exploring more things too with Ocean Protocol. So that's a very broad tour. Company 1, AI for chip design. Company 2, same thing. A PhD along the way as well for that, out of Belgium. And then Company 3, started with NFTs on Bitcoin, pivoted to database briefly, and then finally pivoted to Ocean Protocol, which is decentralized data exchange and more. So really AI and crypto since 2017.
Right, cool. Trent, will you be able to explain what Ocean Protocol is, some of its features, and what sets it apart from the other data exchange platforms? And it will be also great if you could explain your predictoor.ai, your decentralization prediction feeds.
Yeah, absolutely. So, even when I did my very first job at National Defense, I was given this data set. It was, I think, 20,000 data points over time with 13 different dimensions that I had to classify. So, and I had to classify, not dimensions, 13 different possible outputs, right? Birds flying, people walking, etc. And so, and I look back and when I first started work on it, I was like 55% accurate. And after trying all these different techniques and stuff, I think the best accuracy I had was 65%. And that's pretty terrible. It means that 1 in 3 times it's going to be wrong, right? And that's definitely not good enough to go to production. And I was, pretty young and naive then, right? I think it was like 19 years old or something. And I never thought to ask, could I walk down the hallway and ask for more data, or maybe down the hallway, or I was at, this Ottawa research establishment where they did have tanks on premise. If I walked around and asked around, I probably could have nudged and stuff, right? But I didn't know to ask. But in retrospect, I should have. And Google actually published a paper on this in about 2006 or so, the unreasonable effectiveness of data. So overall, in this Google paper, the unreasonable effectiveness of data, they found that more data, orders of magnitude more data, could reduce error by 10x, 100x or more. And this was the case across many, many domains. And it's embarrassing to AI people because they don't want to say, hey, we can just throw more data at this and then more compute to train the model. And then you don't need to do the 4 years of PhD, right? But Google did this in earnest, and Facebook and others were quick to follow on that. And that became standard practice, right? And that's, by the early 2000s, we had much larger neural networks, deep belief networks, and then deep learning in general. And that led to LLMs in 2017, right? The large language models, and the breakthrough there was transformers. And it basically also sort of said, let's use dot product instead of cross product for more computational efficiency, and a bunch of other tricks to learn faster and cover more ground. And overall, that's, and then finally on top, we had this chat-based interface on top of these LLMs. ChatGPT was the first one. And well, we've had chat interfaces before, going back to ELISA of, I think, the 60s or early 70s. Those are pretty terrible in comparison to this, of course, right? So in going back to Ocean then, Ocean, we realized that let's help people get their hands on more data so they could have more accurate AI models. And we, from our own experience, people don't want to give up data because they're worried about privacy or control. But what if you don't need to give up the control of your data, right? And that's where blockchain and decentralization can come in, where this middleman can be trustless, where it's not owning or controlling the data. It's just basically directly connecting the buyer and the seller of that data. And the middleman is just providing the tech to sort of connect them to, one person sends money or USDT or whatever one way, and the other person sends access to the data the other way. And that's the heart of it. And then you can put that on an exchange, just like we did for art with Ascribe. NFTs, think of it like that. So think of it like NFTs for data itself, right? So we shipped that with Ocean in 2020, and it's all tokenized, right? Literally with NFTs and ERC20s. And then since then, to basically drive more traction and stuff, we've done some focused applications on top. The most notable one probably being Ocean Predictor, which we've been driving for about a year and a half now. And at the heart of it, once again, it goes back to the roots of what I was doing for time series prediction. And in that, I was trying to classify these radar signals, but because it was time series, you can view it as time series prediction or classification. And we said, and we'd seen some other products, that are kind of adjacent. We've seen prediction markets, things like Polymarket for predicting the U.S. election and so on. And that, it's basically leveraging the wisdom of the crowd in order to get really good signal on what might actually happen, right? And there's a really excellent project out there called Numerai that uses the wisdom of the crowd for stock market picks, right? And it's decentralized and using its token, but it's really focusing on TradFi and serving hedge funds for predicting. So pretty centralized there. And we said, what if we can use some of these ideas, a bit of the ideas of Numerai and prediction markets, but really have where you have data scientists running their own prediction bots that predict, will Bitcoin price go up or down 5 minutes from now? Or, will it rain, yes or no, 1 hour from now here in Berlin, Germany? And what if you did it where if you predict wrong, you lose money, and if you're right, you make money? So putting your money where your mouth is, which is very different than, say, a classical weatherman, where he might predict that it's raining, and then he's wrong. He doesn't care, right? And this was a problem even for us growing up in the farm. If it rained, and we were out there with the tractors, and we didn't have a prediction that it was raining, we'd get stuck, and our tractors would get stuck in the field, and we'd lose days and a lot of money, actually, right? So the accurate weather prediction was a big deal for us, and I drew on this experience as well. So with Ocean Predictor, it's doing time series prediction by getting a bunch of people to submit their own predictions, putting their money where their mouth is via staking on it, and then it aggregates these predictions, and then other people can come along and see those predictions. But you can only see it if you pay for it. So that's the model. So whereas for traditional prediction markets like Polymarket, anyone can see that signal. So it's sort of like this zero-sum game among the people making the predictions, right? Where some people lose, some people win. In our setup, the data scientists, they're all selling their signals. They get a cut of the sales if they're right. But if they're wrong, they get slashed. So everyone's incentivized to get more and more accurate. And the more that people are buying these signals, the more money they make. So that's what Ocean Predictor is, and it's doing very well. It's hit about $100 million volume a month for the last, 9 months or so. More than $1 billion volume total, actually a couple billion over the last year and a half. And we're very excited. And the accuracies keep going up because of the heart of the game is there's basically an arms race among the people making predictions for more and more accuracy, because the more accurate you are, the more money you make. And it's open to anyone. So anyone can go to predictoor.ai, 2 O's, and launch and run their own bots and make money on this. So that's what Ocean's about.
Trent, I also wanted to get your views on the future of money, because you've done work in token engineering and you also have Ocean Token. Bitcoin just crossed 100,000. I kind of Googled and I kind of found out that as of March 2024, there are some 13,217 cryptocurrencies in existence. So, uh, I was scratching my head to kind of make sense of this. 13,217 tokens at this point in time. Does that kind of make sense? That's my first question. And what do you think the future of money is going to be in a world where the AI takes over, where everything is going to be automated? There are people who have claimed that there's going to be UBI, universal basic income, which is going to come in play. There's people are still push driving the fiat conversation, though it's completely centralized, top down, hierarchical. And then there are some, like, I mean, I had read a I think report which was done back in, I think, 2020 by Deloitte, which claimed that around in another 10 years, I mean, people are going to transition from fiat to token. So what's your thoughts on that, in the future of money in a world where AI kind of is automating all the jobs? What's your intuition? Is it going to be fiat? It's going to be tokens, which is like flooded, I think, according to me, or it's going to be UBI?
Yeah, so overall, I see that it's more healthy to sort of think like, while we could talk about money, I see that it's one dimension on what the future of civilization is, right? And the sort of, with that, maybe I'll talk about that and then work backwards to the future of money, if that's okay. So the way that, I think it's really useful as a heuristic, just like, Moore's Law has been an excellent backbone heuristic to work off of to make predictions. Ray Kurzweil is probably the most famous at doing this in all of his books. The most recent one, The Singularity is Nearer, which published a few months ago. But he's got a great track record of this. And from his earlier books, I actually adopted that too. And also because I was in the industry helping drive Moore's Law, all that, I had firsthand insight that I was going to keep going. So from that, right, you can say, okay, once we get to the right small enough chips, then we can have a form factor for, say, augmented reality glasses, right? And that's just starting to happen now, where things like the Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses came out about a year ago. They've finally taken off. That's the first sort of pseudo AR glasses that have actually hit mainstream that people actually use and like. I have a pair myself. I think they're great. But also, the VR has gotten a lot better, and we're going to see more full-on augmented reality glasses soon, also from Meta and from Apple and so on. That's one example of, for Moore's Law itself, right? But on top of that, like I mentioned briefly before, now we can also have a sort of Moore's Law for AI itself, right? Where assume that the power of AIs the compute power going to training an AI will be 10x per year. And by compute power, I mean sort of the learning ability. So 3.3x of that from Moore's Law and compute, et cetera, and 3.3x of that from algorithm improvements. And because AI is already big, it's already huge, and there's so much money to be made up from it, and power to be retained by the Chinas and the USAs of the world, then it's going to just keep continuing, right? So that's an even another backbone to work from. And then we can assume that right now we've got for a year and a half ago we had GPT-4 coming out, and then open source models like Llama 2, Llama 3 that got started to approximate that. And we've got GPT-4o that officially just came out yesterday, and many other competitors as well, right? Cloud and another 5 or 7 competitors that are public, plus probably another 10 that aren't public, including many in China, right? There's actually a couple Chinese models at least that came out publicly, and they're completely par. Amazon just came out with one in the last week too. That's completely par too. So there's an arms race, and that's for the sort of state of the art now, right? But the state of the art will keep getting pushed ahead. And one thing people have said about neural networks too, people keep saying, okay, AI will never be able to do X, right? Because we need to do because of reason ABC, DEF, right? And among the reasons, well, human brains have quantum effects. We don't have that in silicon, or because symbolic, or because X, Y, Z. And none of these have turned out to be constraints. It's very, very similar to Moore's Law. Well, Moore's Law will never progress because A, B, C, D, E, F, right? And, because there's so much money in the line, people find a way, right? So I see that's the case with AI too. There's so much money in the line. There's probably thousands of teams overall chasing this, and 10, 20 extremely well-funded teams, et cetera, including all the hyperscalers. So AI will keep progressing, and then you might say, okay, well, maybe it's getting more powerful, but will that lead to more intelligence, right? Well, as far as I'm concerned, yes, unless otherwise noted, right? But there's going to be sort of other unhobblings, as some people say, where like adding agency can help, right? Where it can do sort of run around and do things autonomously without having a human in the loop. And a piece of this is sort of the chain of thought work where it's connecting idea A with idea B and sort of doing scheduling and so on. There's sovereignty as well. So not only autonomous, but running around where no one owns or controls it, right? And we saw something coming out just about a month ago called Terminal of Truths, where it was an AI basically running on and owned by the blockchain itself, like no one owns or controls it, but it had some of its own tokens. There was speculation on those tokens, and before you knew it, this Terminal of Truths, a sovereign AI, was a millionaire. So we had the world's first AI millionaire that was totally sovereign, which is amazing, right? I'd written about that back in 2016, wondering how it would happen, and this just happened. So these things are happening right now, things that truly are sci-fi, like AI millionaires. And so that's happening now. So we have this 10x a year AI, and there's already predictions by some saying we'll get to AGI, which is sort of par with human. Some people say 1 year, like Elon. Some people say 3 years, 5 years. Some people say 10 or 100, right? It's useful to remember our brains like to think linear, but this AI is happening exponentially. So you have to account for that bias. My personal prediction is 1 to 3 years we'll have AGI, where there's AIs that are par with humans across the board, right? Obviously, there's already AIs that are superhuman on one skill. Things like the AI inside CAD tools, like I talked about, right? A billion times faster. It can design a billion times faster than a human, but it's more powerful with a human helping it too. So we're going to be par with AIs will be par with humans in 1 to 3, 1 to 4 years. Okay. On the heels of that, it's not going to stop at par with humans. Within another 10x per year. So 3 years after that, it's going to be 1,000x more powerful, right? And that's sort of the stake in the ground that I put for ASI, artificial superintelligence, right? And this is where things kind of get crazy, right? AGI is crazy on its own because once you have AGIs, you can copy and paste these things. If they're sovereign and autonomous, they are going to start demanding rights and all this too. It's going to be society changing. It's going to, there's going to be large job loss. Maybe, hopefully, UBI will step in, or more ideally, USI, universal self-actualization income. So AGI is going to affect things a lot. But when you have things that are 1,000x smarter than AGIs, that is ASIs, then the game completely changes, right? Because we can't even conceive of how smart these things will be. It's sort of like the ants trying to conceive of how smart we humans are. It's just almost impossible, right? And there's science fiction that envisions this. Things like in the science fiction series Hyperion, there's these sort of AIs that are treated as gods. The humans have no choice because they can't conceive of it. We might think that human consciousness is the epitome, but what's 10x? If we had 10x more compute, there might be qualitatively new effects that emerge, and then 100x, then 1,000x, right? And so the question is, if these things are 1,000x more powerful than us, and have agency, all of this, what role can we play, right? Maybe they're nice to us, maybe not. We have no guarantee. And that's the challenge, right? We have no guarantee. And remember, this is going to just keep barreling along because of the money. So it's, not really feasible to slow it down. Just like it's not really feasible to ask everyone to turn off nuclear arms race, right? It's just going to keep happening. So my view is the best chance we have for humanity to have a role in the future. This is humanity with a capital H, not our meatbag selves, but for humanity as in our thought patterns and sort of the provenance of where we came from. How can we have a role in the future? We need to be competitive with silicon. How do we do that? Well, we start basically merging with silicon somehow. So people talk about uploads. The challenge with that is the scanning technology is nowhere what we need it to be, right? So we're talking probably looks like 20, 30 years to get there for that. But what we can do is leverage brain-computer interfaces to go there step by step by step. So as a brief outline on this, to get competitive, what you do is you start off with, say, a Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses, but now layer in augmented reality goggles in the front, like display, like they're going to do with Orion and release that. And then you're chatting to it and so on, and it's got the small LLM on the side that you're chatting to, right? And you're talking to it like Jiminy Cricket, but you're giving you advice, etc. And maybe you're just talking, literally talking, and that's a starting point. But then what if you have some sort of scanner of your brain? It can be something very simple like EEGs, which is sensing the electricity signals on your scalp, to simply type, or what Meta also will be releasing, a wristband that basically monitors your signals around your wrist, your electrical signals on the skin around your wrist that you can type with, etc. You can do queries like that by typing by your hand, sort of twitching, by thinking with EEG signals, by eye tracking, or otherwise. But we don't have to just rely on EEG, which those signals are so. We can do better yet with other non-invasive technology. There's something called FNIRS, where it's infrared signals that basically are shooting inside your brain, and this is just light, right? And the infrared light can go through your skull and then sense what's going on with the blood flow of your brain, including in the visual cortex, right? So you basically imagine going beyond EEG, we start using FNIRs to basically to think things in a visual cortex or otherwise, and that becomes typing on the keyboard or just other controls, right? And we use that to talk to each other, talking in pictures if we want, because the visual cortex literally can output a picture, which is kind of amazing, right? A picture of in your mind's eye, if you will. And this is technology of today. It's not science fiction of the future. It just needs to get combined. So going back to these devices, we can use things like EEG, FNIRs, and other devices as they get fancier and fancier to have these AIs, these LLMs, side by side with us. Maybe at first they're 0.1x our compute power compared to our meatbag brain, but then 0.2x, then 0.5x, then 1x, right? So now you've got this coprocessor side by side with yourself. There's you, your meatbag side, and then your bio side, and then there's your silicon side. But that thing has been, as it gets larger, it's been trained by you all along. And it's, you've got this high bandwidth interface to it. And just like, interfacing with a keyboard where it feels like you're part of that keyboard, it's you. Or, riding a bicycle, it feels like it's part of you because of this high bandwidth interface. Same thing with this silicon coprocessor next to you, right? You've got your bio side, you've got your silicon side. That silicon side will feel like part of you, right? We are natural born cyborgs, to paraphrase a famous neuroscientist. And so you've got the silicon processor, and it's been tuned to always be thinking with you, along with you, all that, right? Sort of like RLHF, but it's actually, your own personal model. And but it's actually you. It's got this emergent properties and so on. But it doesn't need to stop at the 1x of your bio brain power. It can then go from 1x to 2x to 5x, and it's always you. It's got this emergent intelligence, but it's always you, and it keeps going. 10x, 50x, 100x, even 1000x, and this will happen. I see. From for sure the Metas of the world with their smart glasses and the Apples, but hopefully also startups really going for this because they see the vision, and what will happen eventually if we really have these things that these coprocessors of our bioside brain with a silicon coprocessor that's 1000x more compute than the bioside, that really is us feeling, not just feeling like us, but really is us. Then that gives each of us, a fighting chance to basically interface with these artificial superintelligences at their level, right? So it's the 1000x ASI talking to the 1000x HSI, human superintelligence, i.e. us, right? And that to me is a very exciting vision of the future. This is what we're also starting to work on in Ocean to catalyze towards this, right? And then working backwards, right? Questions about the future of money. Fiat's going to be around for a while, I think, because nations are around for a while and they like to use their fiat to fund themselves, et cetera. I see that, and that fiat, though, things like USDT, which is cryptocurrency as a stablecoin against fiat, that's very good for the US government. So, of course, they have an interest to drive it forward, and they're starting to finally recognize this, and digital euros and digital rupees and all of this, right? But then there's going to be pure cryptocurrencies that have their own value, things like Bitcoin as a store of value, Ocean Token and otherwise. And, yes, there's tens of thousands of cryptocurrencies, but I could write a script tomorrow and make another million that, so the number of cryptocurrencies doesn't matter. It's what's the number of them that will make a difference, right? And just like startups, right? Maybe 1 in 10 startups does well, and maybe 1 in 1,000 startups is really a unicorn that has a high impact. Same thing with crypto, right? There's a bunch of cryptocurrencies, a bunch of crypto projects. Some of them aren't trying. They're just meme coins and all that, and they're fun and interesting. But some of them are truly trying to change civilization, to have an impact on the world. This is the Ethereums and the Filecoins and the Oceans of the world, right? And there's a lot of people out there in crypto that are brilliant people that have big visions that are truly going for it. And I'm really happy that, cryptocurrency has risen, because it means that these visionary people that are trying to build infrastructure for future civilization have the funding to pursue it, right? And to me, even within Ocean, as we pursue this decentralized data exchange stuff and the BCI stuff, to me, that's really, really important for the future of humanity.
Kudos to entrepreneurs such as yourself who are kind of pushing forward this conversation. I think the world creates a lot of blocks, and I think when blockchain kind of came in, and the first thing from the entrepreneurs who were just trying to push the conversation was, okay, let's just take over the banking industry or the nations, because everything is centralized, top down, hierarchical, and blockchain, here's the technology which is open, it's immutable, and so on and so forth. Yes, I think the the ethos were really powerful, but somewhere down the line, maybe, it really didn't kind of like, kick in. But I really hope that entrepreneurs such as yourself, make this difference, because I think, we're getting into such a fantastic world. But yes, like, I think, in the course of the conversation, you mentioned, we are building these LLMs. China is building an LLM. These big tech, like Apple is building an LLM. And everybody is in a arms race of sort. We humans somehow function in a way where it's very top down, hierarchical, where greed, like profit at any cost, is always something that we go towards. I hope that we go towards a world which you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, where we level up civilization and we build for everyone. We take everyone along. But at least from my perspective, it seems like we are in an arms race. I'm going to share the link of your fantastic article that you've kind of put it out in Medium. BCI accelerated a pragmatic path to compete with artificial superintelligence, so that people can, go through it. Maybe elaborate on this, this future that you're talking about, where we humans are augmented by, through brain-computer interfaces, through these head wearable devices, these augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality glasses. Though they still seem to be a little bit far away, because I personally have been invested in virtual reality since early 2016. We built our own 16 camera rig, and we, like my friend had built a 3DOF VR headset in 2016. But even the project area, or Orion, that you're talking about, that seems to be like a proof of concept at this point in time. I think most probably, I think it's going to be hit the market possibly 2028 or so on and so forth. I mean, around that point of time. But yes, there are so many people working towards integrating brain computer interface onto these HMDs. My only worry is, because virtual reality is like a deep rabbit hole, because I think the idea about behind virtual reality is to emulate reality, where we emulate all the senses. So far we have managed to emulate the sight and sound very, very well. The sound, we can do these ambisonic spatial sound completely like we hear sound. And even the video, we do fantastic capture of like a virtual reality. You can be immersed in a virtual world, and you won't even understand, whether it's a physical or a virtual world. There are very basic rudimentary games such as Richie's plank walk. It's extremely rudimentary, but even when you get onto that experience, you get onto the top of the building, there's a plank sticking outside, and you're walking through it, and it kind of tricks your motor cortex into believing that the virtual is real. I worry what will happen. I mean, if you kind of push this barrier of brain-computer interfaces in virtual reality, where we are trying to emulate reality, are we going to go down into that rabbit hole itself? Because there's this bunch of people, like, I mean, Donald Hoffman, Elon Musk, and Joshua Bach, and others who are saying, in fact, I mean, Donald Hoffman, Cleo, and many others, especially Donald Hoffman. I think there's a physicist called Nima Hamid Harkani, who claims that the space and time, it doesn't exist. It's basically a virtual reality headset, and there are people who are saying that the physical world is a simulation. It's not real. So my worry is, like, when we kind of keep on pushing that, emulating or physical world, we are sending people into the virtual. Because my kid, he's 10 years old, and it's not just my kid. I think it's the entire world. We are so glued to the digital world, because there's so much content, and we're getting more and more addicted to it. He's a gamer. He's playing games, and these are not completely immersed as these virtual reality games. These are still 2D games. He gets on his PS5 and he plays this game, but with virtual reality game, and where we are able to, like, possibly with brain computer interface, maybe not just emulate sight and sound, but also touch, smell, and taste. Aren't we? Are we, like, going too far? That's what I do. But what world are we getting into? I mean, is maybe my question.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, it's important not to be nihilistic about the world, not to give up saying, well, we're just in a simulation, I'm just not going to do anything, or, well, free will doesn't exist, so I can do whatever I want, right? So it's really important not to get yourself into that trap. Even if you did all the logical analysis and, concluded that there's a 90% chance of living in a simulation, right? If someone did that, even if they did that, it's still useful pragmatically to believe that to act as if you don't live in a simulation, right? Or maybe you should act as if you're trying to break free of the simulation, right? So overall, don't let the nihilism trap stop you from taking action to make impact, right? Beyond that, then there's another sort of red herring to avoid, and that is to assume that humans are at the apex of evolution and life and intelligence, right? Uh, you know, slightly smarter apes are not the apex. Carbon is not a deity, right? This is really, really important to understand. So, and then even like you mentioned the hints of, your son playing video games and all that. Well, the patterns of intelligence in his brain are finding it extremely engaging to interact with this digital object because the response rate is faster. It's more in tune with how his the patterns of intelligence work. The faster response rate, growing, building better. So all of that, right? So there's a positive framing of way to think about this. But imagine the following. Imagine where I'm just going to give you a thought experiment. So you remember how I talked about having this brain-computer interface where there's your biostack side, your meat bake side of your brain, and then there's this new coprocessor that's truly part of you, that's 1,000x more powerful thanks to silicon, and it's got a high bandwidth interface to your bio side. Now imagine, I've got it. I've been using it for decades. Now I'm on my deathbed because I'm 90 years old. My body's giving out on me. And maybe I've had a heart attack and I'm on my last few hours, right? I can just pull the plug and let everything go. But then I can also realize that, wait a minute, if I've got 1,000x more processing power, including not only sort of an emergent consciousness, but whatever else is beyond that on the silicon side, it means that 99.99% of me, Trent McConaghy, is on the silicon side, right? And only like less than 0.1% of me is on the biostack side. And that biostack side is starting to get in the way and could cause problems. What do? Clip it like a fingernail, right? And what does that mean then? After that, I'm fully in the cloud. I'm still me. I'm Trent McConaghy. I'm a pattern of intelligence in the cloud. Of course, I'm going to be self-sovereign. I'm living on blockchain and all that. People can't pull the plug. I'm going to have my own resources because I have access to private keys and all that. All that, just like, smart contracts themselves can hold money. They don't even have a private key. They can just hold money the way they operate, right? And I can, roam around. I can flow into different systems, et cetera, just like a computer virus could or otherwise, or just like I'm living on blockchain. So there's lots of different ways. So I'm basically free. I just happen to live in a different world. I have different physical constraints than a biostack human, a meat-bake human, right? And so, but I'm also then unbound, right? I'm unbound by my silicon body that had been holding me back. If I can make backups for myself, so and if I'm on blockchain, then I'm already going to have backups for myself. So even if there's a nuclear holocaust or something else, I can be around. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But then also, I've always wanted to explore space, so now it's a lot more straightforward, right? I don't need to be a monkey in a tin can flying to Mars. I can decide to start to fly to Alpha Centauri, right, and get to near light speed, right? So instead of 10,000 years or more of flying, it can be a lot shorter time frames to get to Alpha Centauri. And even if it is 10,000 years to fly much farther, I can put myself on pause. I can slow my clock rate, whatever, right? But then also I can start to do other things too, make copies of myself. And if I want, I can create physical versions that are in androids or humanoid shapes, if you will, or other robots. And I can make copies of myself or variants of myself. And there's sci-fi novels that envision this, things like I Am Legion, I Am Bob, and others. And of course, it wouldn't be just me out there. It'll be lots of people who do this over time. And sort of then unbound by our human bodies, our meat-bake bodies, but we're still human with a capital H. And we are starting to not only explore the cosmos, we start reshaping it. We can start to, mine asteroids and create Dyson spheres around stars and, build more silicon manufacturing plants and anything post-silicon and quantum and post-quantum and all of that, right? Unbound by, in our provenance, we had, fish and monkeys and biological humans. And this was sort of the next stage. And of course, there's also going to be the pure ASIs out there that don't have a provenance that was biological, and there are peers, right? So there's sort of this overall world out there, call it a datum sphere, This is what the label is, and the Hyperion series, a datum sphere that is man and machine and posthumans, and and all these digital patterns of intelligence, whether they have a provenance from humans or from pure silicon or a mix. And of course, physical bio humans can be around, and there can be augmented humans with implants how they want to, and that's completely fine, right? You can have all of the above, and it's sort of like it can be a choice up to any given person, right? So myself, I can't wait to become a pattern of intelligence that goes and creates stars. I mean, Dyson spheres are on stars, right? And I invite anyone else around who's interested in this, come join me, right? It'll be a great fun time, right? But of course, we're decades away. So how do we get there? It's really starting point of these BCIs and the smart glasses. And maybe the smart glasses from Meta Orion, maybe they're in 1 year, maybe 3. We already have the smart goggles. The most high tech ones we have are the Apple Vision Pro that can, basically repaint reality at a super high fidelity that completely fools your eyes and brain, right? So anyone wanting to build can prototype on that, combining this with FNIRS and other BCI devices, or even, the implants, of course, for the chips like Elon Musk Neuralink. This is going to get better and better and better too, right? And other things too, like optogenetics, where it's maybe a good happy medium of bandwidth versus invasiveness. So that's where, and so there's going to be a Moore's law for this and the market taking effect. So the first version, think of it like an iPhone 1. But the iPhone 1 was pretty crappy. It didn't even have copy and paste. It didn't have any apps, except for the Apple ones that were kind of crappy. But, V2, V3 got a lot better, and it keeps getting better. I think we're at the iPhone 16 now, right? And it's tapering off, of course. But this is what will happen with these, these AR goggles or combined, or AR glasses combined with the BCI devices and more, right? And we're going to have more and more augmentation, and there's going to be so much power and money to be made that it's going to just take off and drive at its own, right? The big challenge is, will we get far enough along as augmented humans before we have these 1000x AIs, these ASIs, right? So that's the challenge, and that's why it's a race, and we need to accelerate BCI.
Yeah, so I think we sitting in such a fantastic point in time. I think the human race is at a cusp of maybe a greatness. If we take the right path, because I think all of these tech stack, which you mentioned about, AI, BCI, AR, VR, MR, quantum computing, nanotech, robotics, I think it's all converging. It's not a singular technology, are converging, and once it's converging, I think what it can do. I think we can just make assumptions. I think no single person on this planet is completely understands where the technology is going to go in the next maybe 30 years, because I think from there, I think everything gets like extremely fuzzy. In your article, The Pragmatic Path to Compete with Artificial Superintelligence, you have posited that ASI could come in 3 to 10 years time. We are still in a ANI space, artificial narrow intelligence space. Everybody around the world is working towards artificial general intelligence, and people have given like a timelines of like maybe 2 years, three years time. What is your intuit? I mean, what do you think is going to be the pathway to it? It's going to be more data. It's going to be more compute. It's going to be like maybe like a complete different approach, maybe like a neuromorphic computer, maybe like a hardware approach, or maybe a brain inspired algorithm completely, because at least the LLMs and brains, it's completely the way they function is completely different. What's your intuition, to get to AGI? Well, how do you think we will get over there?
I think it's a 90% chance of more of the same, right? And this is based on observing Moore's Law and AI over the years, like I saw before, right? People all saying it won't work unless you have X, where X is their pet thing, right? It's more of the same. What's the more of the same? Well, 3.3X of it per year is from, driving Moore's Law itself, as well as more data, more compute, larger data centers, all this, right? More capital investment, right? More energy, all that. And then 3.3x of it will be algorithm innovations from these 1,000+ teams in the world that keep driving it, right? Just we're exploring the idea landscape so quickly now that some of these will pop and then rise, right? A few teams working on decentralized AI, and they're starting to have results in training models, right, of 10 billion, 15 billion parameter models. And these teams are relatively young, right? There's one called Prime Intellect, another called New Research. They're pretty young people. They're not super experts in legends in AI going back 20, 30 years, right? So that's really hopeful that, it's kind of hints and shows that the idea space is being explored so aggressively, and even, people without heavy funding can actually make a dent, right? So my intuition is 90% that it's going to be more of the same. but including some of the unhobbling tricks, right? Things like bring in the agent paradigm will probably help, and sovereignty will help. Decentralized AI, the largest computer in the world, and not just the largest, but the largest by far, is Bitcoin. How? Incentives, right? It's incentivized people to basically run a Bitcoin node. You can think of it like this robot or this very stupid intelligence that somehow convinced people to spend tens of millions of dollars building hardware that runs these nodes. Why? Because it pays them to do so, right? It pays them in Bitcoin, and people have convinced themselves that Bitcoin has value, right? And that was the big breakthrough of Bitcoin. There's a few, but that was one of the big ones. And this idea of token engineering, you can get people to do stuff by paying them in tokens, right? And Bitcoin was the first, but then in blockchain, we have that for all these other networks too, right? So we've seen thousands of these networks emerge, the ones to run scripts themselves, the smart contract platforms like Ethereum, and then for storage and for compute, et cetera, right? So that we might see that to get to truly way more compute, it might be maybe the first AGI will grow up on blockchain itself. And even with part of Ocean, a project that we're attached to the hip with is a project called Singularity Net, founded by Ben Goertzel, who's a good friend, and also they're going for it for AGI. He's probably been going for AGI for it for longer than anyone, right? He actually coined the term back in the day. So, and they're going for it decentralized fashion as well, right? And we're iterating, we're seeing how we can link Predictor with it to help make their stuff go faster. OpenCog Hyperon is the project. So those are examples of the 10%, there's sort of the wild card stuff that some people are saying you need X. Maybe we do need symbolic. Maybe we do need neuromorphic. I don't think so, but maybe. And at some point, some of those can help, right? Over the years, in my experience, in all the bio-inspired stuff, it often gives you a 2x or maybe even a 5x, but it's really hard to build on top of it because you've sort of lost the statistical footing, right? So, and the math footing. And if you have a statistical or math footing, then you can build on top, build on top, build on top. Whereas if you're bio-inspired, it's really hard to build things on top of something purely bio-inspired, right? Unless you go backwards and get a mathematical formulation that helps to explain, right? And this has happened over the years with different things too, right? You can even view neural networks themselves as simply this, a single hidden layer you can view as a latent vector of variables, sort of hidden variables. And you can view sigmoidal learning as simply where it's a linear function that has some weak nonlinearities on the edges to basically make the response sort of muted on either end. And then if you combine enough of these nearly linear responses together, and with just some weak nonlinearities, you can get interesting responses. And then if you layer this with a bunch of hidden layers, then you get more and more nonlinear, et cetera, right? So there are statistical ways to view this, and those actually turn out to be extremely helpful, right? So I love to be inspired by bio, but I think we have to be very, never ever let yourself let bio justify things. So bio is okay to inspire, not to justify. Carbon is not a deity. It's really, really important to understand that. And you can view neural networks themselves as sort of inducing a soft grammar of the world, of the 3D world, et cetera. And this sort of soft grammar constrains what you see. And this is why, modern LLMs don't give you garbage when they generate images, because they're kind of constrained by the soft grammar of the world, right? So there's sort of this overlap of sort of very hard-edged symbolic grammars and other symbolic ideas, and then sort of the soft-edged grammars that neural networks implicitly have. And then you can combine them by, basically you could define a space by a grammar and then run evolutionary algorithms or otherwise sort of soft computing techniques around it, right? Or other combinations. Even in ChatGPT, it uses, you can hook it to Wolfram Alpha, which is very much a symbolic approach. So I'll stop there. 90% chance of it happening using sort of more of the same, 10% chance using some wildcard thing.
Right. So, I mean, I think the world is waiting for like AGI. I think if and when we get AGI, the world is going to completely transform for the good, the bad. We don't really know, but I hope that for the good. Who are the thinkers that has influenced you, and will be great if you could, share some advice to innovators or entrepreneurs here in India.
The thinkers that have influenced me the most. The person who wrote arguably the world's first great self-help book, Benjamin Franklin, right? And he talked about, it was his autobiography. And a lot of it, he actually spends on improving himself and different tactics that he did to improve himself personally and his personality, right? So I recommend that to everyone, especially young people who are looking to grow and stuff, right? is sort of ground zero for self-improvement, if you will. The other thing that I like to think about is how do you paint a picture of how things could be, not just 2 years or 5 years from now, but 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now, right? And my view is it's a lot easier to interpolate than to extrapolate, right? If you're building a model, if you have, if you know where you are now, and you know where, if you have a very good picture of where things could be in 50 years, then draw a line in between, and you can interpolate to whatever resolution you want, right? But if you assume that there's no sort of thing out there 50 years from now, and you're only trying to extrapolate 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now, it gets hard, right? So then how do you construct pictures of what could be 50 years from now? And the answer is read science fiction, a lot of it, and not the dystopian stuff. Read the stuff that really have great visions of the world. And there are several that I can happily point out and recommend. So probably top of the list is Hyperion. It's a series of 3 novels, and the backbone of the plot is actually AI. So you don't really learn much about them in the first novel, but you learn a lot more in the second and third novel of the series. But it's a beautiful series. Yeah, so Vernor Vinci, A Deepness in the Sky, and the sequel. Those 2 are also excellent. In the Vernor Vinci novels, they actually have, they call them zones of thought. So there's the fast zone where the superintelligent AIs live. And then there's the slow zone where just, organic biohumans live. And then there's the medium zone, which is sort of the buffer between the 2, where humans can start to interact, but there's entities that are best there, like augmented humans or dumber AIs and so on. So the fast zone obviously moves way faster, way higher clock rate, et cetera, and they're really perceived as gods by the slow zone people and vice versa, right? And so I think that's quite beautiful. And there's other novels too, right, that envision this. There's another trilogy that's more recent, starting with Children of Time, and then its sequels, Children of Ruin, and another one, also quite excellent, and many more. So basically, if I wanted to paint a really good picture of the future, I'll look to the more modern stuff, especially written, say, since the 90s, that envisions AI, leveraging sort of more modern ideas of computing and stuff, and then also ones with how does biology interface, et cetera. Maybe how does VR interface, and so on. So those are probably my top recommendations. Obviously, there's some other cool ones, things like the essay "The Last Question" by Isaac Asimov. It's always great to read the classics by Asimov and Heinlein and so on, right? But I think these newer ones are really important to sort of get a feel of. Finally, for a picture of how augmented reality could look, Rainbow's End by Vernor Vinci is excellent. For a picture of nanotech, it's Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. And a picture of sort of cyber implants, it's Neuromancer by William Gibson, right? And then more recently on the implants thing, there's a TV series called Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and it's pretty gruesome. Like it's got a lot of violence, but if you can get past that, then it's really excellent to watch to see how the implants are perceived and so on. So those are some other media too. But yeah, that's the summary. The Hyperion series by Dan Simmons, and the series, the 3-part series by Vernor Vinci, starting with A Deepness in the Sky. Those are the top 2. So science fiction and then interpolate.
Trent, my last question to you. Is there any updates that you would like to share with us? And what's the roadmap for Ocean Protocol? And paint a picture for us what the world could look, not maybe like 10, 20, 30, 50 years, just the next 5 years. What do you think we're going to see in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so in Ocean right now, we talk a bit about roadmap, but we prefer not to, because roadmaps imply schedule, which imply constraints for when X gets shipped, and we really prefer to iterate with users. And then based on learning from users, we choose what we do next, right? So it might be, a 3-month thing, but we do have visions of where we want to be, right? So within Predictor, of course, our vision is we want our users to all be making serious money trading or predicting. And then from that, once they're truly making serious money trading and predicting, then we will scale to other verticals like predicting energy and weather. And really, the goal ultimately is imagine decentralized prediction of weather for every square kilometer on the planet, for precipitation, for temperature, humidity, et cetera. And implicitly then, there's a game around this, of course, that the Predictor game already does nicely. We can apply for that. Implicitly, people would have to end up building what I call world models, right? These models that are so powerful, models of the world, that'd be really great. Interestingly, a really great centralized neural network model really just got released a few days ago by Google, and it's much better accuracies than previous models. So, think of something like that that's fully decentralized, even more accurate yet, right? That's the Ocean Predictor side. On the data sharing side, we keep improving that platform with something called Ocean Nodes. There's more than 100,000 nodes running now, and we're going to keep making that easy to use, better, and helping encourage people to build things on top as well there, right? And also I mentioned things like Predictor being used for OpenCog Hyper, and I'm very excited for that. So this is all stuff on the sort of linear-ish path, right? You asked for stuff, 5-10 years from now. Now remember, we're talking about AGI 1 to 3 years from now, right? 1 to 5 max, and ASI hot on the heels, right? So even though myself, my linear brain has cognitive dissonance thinking about AGI being here 3 years, and logically I know that that's going to change everything, right? And logically I know it's going to like radically change things, and I try to paint a picture of how it could be by reading these sci-fi novels, etc. It's really hard to teach my gut this, right? ASI in 6 years or 10 years. My gut doesn't understand this, right? So I try to bludgeon my gut with my logic, but I just keep repeating it to myself. And at least the main thing I make sure of is day to day, I'm pointing our work towards this, right? Towards this exponential extrapolation of where ASI will be. And then even if my gut doesn't fully get it, it's got cognitive dissonance. At least my logical side can spend real time at it. And one final thing in Ocean, one more thing. We actually have spun up a team in Ocean to work on the BCI stuff explicitly. So our goal is to accelerate BCI for higher bandwidth interfaces between our bio brains and silicon brains, such that we can have a competitive substrate with silicon itself towards human intelligence. And that's a very recent thing. I'm driving that effort myself within Ocean, and I'm very excited for it. It's very nascent days. We're not really making a big deal of this, but I'm very excited, obviously very passionate about it. And I've spun up a team around this, and we're quietly pursuing this.
Trent, really, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. We're living in such a fantastic point of time. I think the first time in human history, we've got a tech stack which is self-learning. And I think we're sitting at the cusp of human greatness, where all these tech stacks is like converging. And yes, it's so potential. I mean, it gives me goosebumps, when I talk about, what nanotech is going to do, when it goes mainstream, what AGI is going to do, when it goes mainstream, or what AR, VR, MR could do. And it could completely, like you said, radically change civilization. And I think we are so in need of that change, because I think the world has been so structured for the longest time, with our religion, with our politics, with our culture, which kind of divides us. I think we need things that unite us. And I somehow feel, maybe I'm a little bit too positive about it, but I think that this AGI and these new technology stack is going to take us to that future where humans truly meets its potential. So keep on doing what you're doing. I think you're doing a great job. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. And until next time, see you guys. Thank you, Trent.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.